And
And
we're
we're
live.
live.
Yeah, welcome back to the Board Dogs Club. It's only been a week. Did you enjoy the vacation?
Yeah,
For me, it wasn't a vacation. It was sick leave.
it wasn't. I think both of us were sick.
Yeah, I had two different things. I had some viral thing, and then as I was getting over the viral thing, Eli gave me some bronchial thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was kind of going back and forth a little bit around the house where, like, he would give it to me, and I would give it to him, and he would give it to her, and she would give it to him, and,
Right.
because he has absolutely uh, no stopping. Like, if he wants a kiss, he don't care if somebody's sick. He don't really register it. So I like the idea of kind of modernizing the Victorian look, I guess. For lack of a better term, really. I like the idea of having cloaks with mantles, and
Okay.
they don't necessarily have to have top hats or whatever, but
Well,
so
what
we're
one of the
advancing
things?
a false history or a false future or whatever.
Well, one of the things I've always wondered, because you always see post-apocalyptic stuff, and I've seen some of the arguments that, like, if you look at like all the S&M gear from like Mad Max, and that kind of became like a style of post-apoc, like, oh, that's just shorthand for post-apocalyptic. That's what you wear, and I've seen the argument that a lot of that stuff would have been more readily available than, say, military gear. So it kind of makes sense that they had it. I'm like, okay, whatever. But I keep thinking, if we ran out of oil or whatever, well, the Victorians didn't have oil. Like, they're still going to clear around the world. They're doing all
Well, they had
kinds of
oil,
things.
but they didn't have like a pipeline to what the oil that we use is. It'd be
Right.
whale oil or olive oil or different types of oil.
And they didn't really have internal combustion engines and things like, electricity. Yeah, they knew what it was, but they didn't have a whole bunch of it.
It,
So,
it depends on where you're landing in the time zone.
well, so when you say you kind of like the idea of modernizing some Victorian aspects, it makes
Right.
perfect sense. Like, if you said something that was like, yeah, I think you should wear really giant shoes and have a red nose. And like, no, he's not a clown. But
Of course, we
what?
know that I wouldn't have said that anyway. So, but I am trying to think of, like part of it is trying to conceive of a
Oh,
a style, something that takes us a little bit away from what everybody else is doing. Because I think everybody that goes futuristic uh, either goes to the Mad Max style or anime.
okay.
So it's like the one or the other. They're doing Ghost in the Shell, Gundam suits, stuff like that, or they're doing um, your more post-apocalyptic look.
Yeah.
And I, as much as I hate Star Trek, uh,
You just lost like 7 viewers. I'm positive of it. Just
well,
instantaneously.
I don't give a shit. I really don't. If they were here thinking that I was going to recreate Star Trek, then they need to go someplace else.
For the record, I have enjoyed Star Trek. I have disliked Star Trek. It just kind of depends on which one it is for me.
Well, like that's the thing when I say as much as I hate Star Trek, is because really, it's not what it was intended to be originally.
Well,
It's
it's
definitely
definitely
it's,
changed.
it's definitely not Gene Roddenberry's idea.
No.
Have you ever seen Gene Roddenberry's Earth 2?
Did that come out in the 90s?
Could be late 80s. It didn't last very long.
Yeah, I kind of remember a little bit of it, but not much.
But it had Clancy Brown in it, and it's one of the few times he played a good guy. Clancy Brown is the bad guy from the original Highlander, bad guy from one of the bad guys from the Shawshank Redemption, but he was kind of a security chief type character there, and it was like Earth 2 was, I think they crash landed on a planet and they had to kind of make do. So it was pretty interesting, the idea that these were not just your regular starship captain that could resolve some weird dilemma and then just go home or go on to the next star date or whatever. These were people that had to deal with whatever they had to deal with that popped up on the planet, and I kind of really like that idea. But the only way that works as an idea is if nobody knows what's going on the planet for sure, you know?
Yeah. I think if I really tried, I could make a Star Trek story that you like. But it wouldn't be very Star Trek-y.
Yeah, it'd be probably pretty hard. Like, and don't get me wrong, like I've watched episodes of Star Trek that I didn't mind or that I did like, but on the overall, and the only reason the only reason I brought even Star Trek up is the uniforms and the clothing that they had developed, more than just your military clothing.
Yeah.
Which that military clothing wasn't very protective for the military, but I guess that's kind of where we are nowadays anyway, too. So my thinking was that, like, what they didn't have, they made up for with where they did experiment or did. There's a lot of things that Star Trek created that we use nowadays that didn't exist when they started theorizing it. So credit where credit's due. I just didn't really enjoy the show. It wasn't really, most of the shows weren't really the type of thing that I was interested in. I was far more interested in Star Wars than Star Trek.
I am the same way. Which is why, if I was going to write a Star Trek storyline, it would be, I would have a group of aliens that are pissed off at the Prime Directive. Like, you let us suffer through what? For how long? Because of your stupid Prime Directive. It would be a revenge tale. They would be seeking to, like, hunt down, they would be so anti-Federation because they've all had to suffer needlessly because of the Prime Directive. And I just think that's a beautiful storyline.
Well, it's definitely a much more interesting idea.
Well, that Prime Directive is ultimately stupid. The idea that here you are in advanced society and there's a society that's not as advanced as you, and you're going to let them suffer through everything when you can alleviate 99% of their problems. You're a dick. It's just kind of how I feel about that. So, whatever. But we were talking about 80s and 90s IP that we wouldn't mind seeing remade. And I jokingly said it'd be kind of neat to see Knight Rider versus Airwolf. And we started talking about you can't really remake Knight Rider because hell, half the stuff that made Kit really interesting, you can go and buy right now. Like the only thing you can't do is get the weapons. But you know, we started making
You know what?
is
You know what I'd love to do with Knight Rider?
what.
Make Kit the villain.
Well, they had that.
Yeah, I
his name
know.
was Car.
Car. I know. Car, but
or the semi, whatever that was.
He was the villain for Kit. I'm talking about the villain. Like there are no other cars. This is like an AI that took over, distorted. Like he's trying to attempt to overthrow the humans or whatever. Those misguided fools who think that they need his advice.
Did you ever watch Hell on Wheels?
A little bit.
Okay,
I think I watched a little bit past the first season, and those shows after the first season, they seemed to fucking flounder.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that.
They started attacking the Mormons and all this other shit. Yeah, I think that's pretty much my feelings on most new shows nowadays. They all seem to punch you in the face with a good season, and then the next season they either flounder, completely flip flop, or whatever. I just binge watched fucking Blue Bloods.
Yeah.
And for the first 11 seasons, I think.
Wow.
They were really, really fair. Where you had a cop family that were pretty much right wing, but there was a lawyer in the family, and she worked for the DA's office, and she kind of pushed the left wing a little bit, and her daughter, and then they had opposition, like Whoopi Goldberg played a character that was a representation or a representative of the people of New York, and you had a lot of conflict politically like that, but they fairly covered both sides. And you're basically focused on the commissioner and his family, and that family tradition is his dad was a commissioner and his kids are cops, and one died in the line of duty and all that. And he's all about protecting his cops and making sure the streets are safe from crime and all this other stuff. And he's taking a very hard right-wing stance on crime, right? So he's not saying, "Oh, we'll let the potheads get away with this" or whatever. But as the seasons progress, everybody else is, and then by the 12th season, they start interjecting women in power, and everybody can't. None of the guys that were very capable guys to this point can do anything without their wives or their partners or their whatevers that are women basically controlling this stuff. And then they're starting to not make busts based on feelings, and it really just completely flip-flopped from something that was realistic. You have to deal with this. This is your job, is to arrest people for this, whether you like it or not. And you do the job, whether you like it or not, though you can conceive of why things are wrong or where there are problems. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was really, really fair because it covered both ends of it. There was nobody that was right or wrong. The commissioner just lived how the commissioner lived, and those that were against the commissioner blamed the commissioner for everything else, right?
Right.
And he just took that blame, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever. I mean, that's what you're gonna blame me no matter what. But still, it ain't right."
Yeah.
So I just found that interesting that show started off very strong, 11 seasons, and then the last 9 seasons, they just went completely the opposite. Like, really? I just I don't know.
Well, the reason why I brought up Hell on Wheels is because part of
Yeah.
what I was trying to think of was, in my brain, I guess, was the Colin Bohannon character. He's a he fought for the Confederacy, and I was like, well, what if you had a guy like that in a post-apocalyptic scenario? He's obviously competent, and he's got some he's done some odd he's made some bad choices. but they're not necessarily bad for him yet. So I mean, it's kind of like one of those things where part of it was I was trying to come up with a James Bond like villain. Because at first I felt like I was veering too much into, because I've said G.I. Joe is kind of the comic book is kind of a inspiration point for me. And I was like, well, okay, but I don't want Cobra Commander and I don't want Cobra, and just trying to come up with something. But when I started thinking more about James Bond villains and what they tend to be like, and it's a lot easier when you have Russia and we don't have Russia. So
Well, we very well could have a Russia, but
I don't want any big. I didn't want any big dominant country.
well, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that we could have a city that represents that, because we're not using any one country.
That's true. But I mean, and to some extent, then I would liken this character, because in my brain, the reason why I said Colin Bohannon is just like, all right, he's a Confederate officer at the beginning.
One of the Shaw story that I'm writing is basically right along those lines.
So, but I mean, if you think, go Confederate officer, all right, that's an easy one to make the villain. And then, but when you said Russia and we could have a city state that kind of represents Russia and whatever, it kind of makes sense that
he's a big old discussion about that already, but maybe I'm mistaken. Like that whole designing the cities thing we kind of covered.
Well, yeah, it fits with everything that we've said. But yeah, just knowing what I know of Putin and how wasn't Putin like part of their asset, like their secret service or whatever? He was some kind of. I mean, he's a real. He can fight, like. So as a villain, it kind of makes sense to kind of pull from those things, but also, I wanted a villain that, at least to some degree, they should think they're doing the right thing. They definitely should think they're doing the right thing. But it should also be, I think it's probably better if the villain is at least somewhat nuanced, that you don't have to agree with them, but you should recognize how they got to where they were. If that makes sense.
Okay. For me, I don't know huge amounts about Putin, but I do respect the guy who knows his history.
Yeah.
When Tucker Carlson did his interview, the first part of that interview was not only him giving Tucker Carlson history of the Ukraine and Russia, but he also gave him documents that date back to like the 1100s. Like he gave him copies of documents that date way back. See, originally Ukraine, the word Ukraine meant outskirts of Russia or outskirts of I don't remember. I want to say just outskirts of Russia, but they were meaning what it was really meaning was that it was uh, they were it was still Russia, but it was just like the border states or the border cities, the stuff that was along the border. The cities that got incorporated from other countries. Putin said, like when he toured Ukraine originally, they still had signs up in both Russian and uh, whatever other. Oh, I wish I knew more about it. You know what I mean? Like I wish I could remember what all he said, but he's talking about the other country that bordered them, that they annexed part of it, and he's basically saying that the Holy Roman Empire made a grab for Ukraine because they opposed the Orthodox Roman Church, Roman Orthodox Church. And he's got documents to show where the people of Ukraine begged Russia to come and get them back because they were so abused by the Polish. And I mean, if anyone hasn't watched that interview due to the ignorance that they were claiming that, like, you're anti-American or whatever, it's bullshit. You need to watch it because, first of all, before he even answers really questions about why he's doing what he's doing, Putin that is, he gives you a history of what really was. Now, if you dispute the history, that's one thing. If you can show me how he's wrong about the history, then that would be a totally different argument. But his arguments are all based on historical documents and the way it's supposed to be. Like, originally, Ukraine doesn't have a separate language. It's Russian. It's either Russian or I want to say Polish, but it's not Polish. Now I gotta look it up because I want to know what the other country is that borders it.
Well, what, between Poland or Ukraine?
Ukraine, yeah.
What borders Ukraine? Oh, come on, computer, go faster than that.
So it's Belarus,
Romania,
Slovakia, Romania, Moldavia.
Belarus, Hungary, Moldova, Poland, Romania, Russia, and Slovakia.
Right. Yeah, and Poland. So
Yep.
Hungary, that is it. That's what it was. That's what he was talking about, I think. Hungary, there's part of Ukraine is Hungary also. So he was touring it and he saw signs that were in Hungarian and signs that were in Russian. But no strictly Ukrainian flag or signs and stuff. So it's interesting that everybody poses it as like he's a bad guy or whatever. But I think he's got justification for why he's doing what he's doing. That doesn't mean that I think it's necessarily the right thing to do or the right way to go about it.
Right.
But it's not like he's, just doing something out of the blue and just attacking them because he wants to be a conqueror or whatever. They were part of Russia for a long, long time, and they had asked to be part of Russia. So I'm sure there are plenty of people there that are still wanting to be part of Russia. I know when they first went in, and they were talking about Putin attacking them, and they were interviewing Russian troops that were there. The Russian troops thought they were out on maneuvers, and that the Ukrainians were attacking them out of the blue. They were surprised that there was an attack because they weren't sent over to attack. They were just sent over for maneuvers. So I don't know. It's a really weird situation. It's a really hard call on who's the good guy and the bad guy in that situation. To me, I don't think that Putin and Russia are necessarily the bad guys. I don't necessarily think that Ukraine is either, but we don't know if there's more politics beside what we see, because we do know that the president of Ukraine is an actor.
I'm sure he was qualified for the job.
Yeah.
Just like Ronald Reagan was.
I doubt it. I doubt the same qualifications as Ronald Reagan.
Well, he ran California, which is as good as running another country. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, he ran California and had to fight the liberals. So.
Yeah.
That's automatically different. That's not what's going on in Ukraine. The liberals are gift wrapping our money to them. You watch the State of the Union?
Oh, God, no.
You probably should avoid the topic, but I did, and then I watched the response from a few different people, and so, yeah, it was it was a horrible example of leadership.
I am shocked.
And basically, and I knew it was going to be this before I watched it, but it was everything that's good that's happened in the last few years is him, and everything bad is Trump still.
Right.
So, but then he's, making promises that he's going to overturn, Roe versus Wade. How are you going to overturn shit? You're not a fucking judge. You don't have any power to do that. He's talking about people that had to go out of state to get abortions because of Roe versus Wade or whatever. And then on the other hand, he's talking about the border, and he just bounces around, and it's all like all the things that's good that's happened is him. Like he has the border under control.
Oh yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
He does. He wants open borders. It's an open border. Mission accomplished. Incredibly successful. Just because it doesn't do anything for Americans, but hey, whatever. That wasn't his goal.
Yeah, except for it kills Americans, and that was mentioned.
Well, trust me, I understand.
Lincoln Riley, and he's all like Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, because he doesn't know anything, but
yeah,
for me, it's and
I find it funny that Alex Jones was saying that he said so many lies during that hour and a half or whatever.
Well, yeah, but
that for you to investigate the lies, you couldn't listen to the speech. There's no way you would get what was going on out of the speech or get anything out of it, because you're still going to be investigating all the lies that he fucking threw out
Well,
during that time weeks later.
my problem with the whole open borders crowd is that, they'll throw things out like, we're a nation founded by immigrants. And I'm always like, okay, all right, cool. How'd that work out for the people who are already here?
So the Native Americans didn't found it.
Well, I'm just saying.
No, here's the thing. The Native Americans didn't found it. And this is unpopular but true, that at the time that we came over here, I say we loosely,
yeah,
there was over 500 tribes in America, and very few of those 500 tribes, and I'm talking about in the U.S. America,
right.
Not the continent America.
Right.
So over 500 tribes in the U.S., and I think 3 of them that I know of claimed territory. All of the other ones claimed hunting grounds. They moved, they migrated.
Yep.
So they didn't claim ownership of the land. They didn't claim ownership of the deer. They didn't claim ownership of the buffalo.
Well,
there's one instant I can think of where one tribe, there were 2 tribes they lived along this river, and they liked this particular kind of fish. The tribe that lived further up on the river traded those fish to the other tribes so that they could get, whatever they wanted. That was the currency, because it was a really beloved type of fish. So the tribe that lived downstream one night decided that they were going to try to reroute the stream. So they rerouted the stream. Well, when the first tribe found out that they rerouted the stream, that first tribe invaded that other tribe during the night and killed every single man, woman, and child.
Okay.
Genocide.
Uh-huh.
Not the golden savage, whatever. Genocide over fish.
Uh-huh. Well, trust me, I know everyone who wants to give, there are certain groups they want to give a complete pass on all the atrocities that group did, but they want to make sure that when it comes to European Americans, that we make them out to be the worst people on the planet ever. And I'm more in line with the people are people, and our system of government has helped more, and our system of economics has helped more people on the planet than any other system ever. And that's a pretty easy thing to document. And that's cool. But again, if you think the Native Americans were mistreated because they did not secure their borders and they allowed unfettered immigration, then why do you think that's a good thing now, to not protect your border and allow unfettered immigration? It's the same cause. I mean, it's bad for the people who are here.
Well, so I'll look up the book for you, but that particular book that I was reading that had that information, it was talking about the myth of the golden savage, the myth that before white societies and all this other stuff.
Oh yeah, I think they were in tune with nature. No, they weren't.
They lived peaceful lives, but in actuality, they are guilty of more genocide than any of the white guys that come along afterwards. And this book actually documents all this stuff, and it's really interesting. Like, entire tribes have been wiped out, genocide.
Yeah.
over the failure of dowry, failure to deliver on dowry.
Well, I figure every society has probably got that somewhere in their background. Because one of the primary things about culture is it has to survive, which means it has to be able to enact violence. Not that I'm saying that should be your goal, but if you can't become violent, you're not a threat, you're a victim. So some of this stuff is evolutionary. I think that societies have to go through a phase that they are bloody and violent and brutal. And it's not cool. We shouldn't be we should try to stay away from that, obviously. But I'm also not going to say that I'm going to judge all societies based off the things they did hundreds, if not thousands of years ago.
The first biplane that landed in the Maori tribes.
Yeah.
The king watched it land and asked the pilot if he could fly him over his enemy tribe, like over the forest or whatever, to see, to look at his enemy tribe, right?
Yeah.
The pilot agreed. As the pilot's agreeing, he's loading rocks in. So, effectually, the first time he sees a flying device, he's already planning to use it for war.
Well, our government does the same thing.
He was dropping rocks on his enemy. No, I mean this is different. Like our government does it in an organized way.
Yeah, but they look at technology.
They do it, but they don't go like, oh, wait a minute. As they see the first flying, they didn't go, hey, there's a balloon. Can you fly me over? You know what I mean? Can you fly me over the Kaiser so I can drop this rock on his head? So, I'm not saying that we're very far different, but what I'm saying is that, the first time he saw a flying device, he didn't imagine all the other things that could happen from a flying device, which is what a lot of these scientist types want us to believe, that they would see this they would see this flying device and then imagine what they could achieve from it, but that's not what they did, So I just find it interesting that this is all documented stuff. And these are the same people that are telling us it would be peaceful if we just left them to their own devices. But their own devices weren't very peaceful either. There's one tribe. There's one tribe that they didn't take slaves really. They might take a random woman slave or whatever, but what they did was they took their enemies' heads and they carried them home and they taunted them. So they would taunt their enemies' heads long after they killed their enemies. And if they had taken a slave, it would have been one of their enemies' children or whatever, so that they could taunt that head with the fact that their child was their slave.
That's messed up.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was talking about. And that is, it pretty much defeats the myth of the golden savage anyway.
That's always been a myth.
Well, but this is documented proof. All the instances that I'm mentioning here, that they're not so distant that they're hearsay or that there's in someone's journal, or unless it was a doctor or somebody that was actually taking down notations for a record. So I just find it really interesting that they think that we are the evil ones and we're bringing evil to the natives and the savages or whatever. Like they wouldn't have been able to come up with it on their own, which is way wrong.
So you know that that story of mine with Umjat and Snurl.
Mm-hmm.
I had submitted that to my favorite writing contest and got straight up rejected with it. Which
Straight up
whatever.
rejected.
Yeah, like it's not disqualified. It's not a DQ, but it's not even rejected with comments. It's just, yep, you didn't even place. So it's not even good enough for them to say it's almost honorable mention. And I'm thinking, out of all the stories I've ever submitted there, I would probably put that one in my top 3. And I'm just like, all right. Well, that's one of those things. Now, part of me is like, well, you know,
sorry.
It just means that it's not for them, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be for them. All right. But
well, I don't know. Like, I think they talk about the honorable mention means that it's almost publishable. So what does that mean?
I don't know.
If you come up with stuff that's almost publishable already, or even what they consider to be publishable but not fit for this particular publication, you're not going backwards. I'm sorry. I don't buy it.
Well, I don't. And what I think it is, you know, the one judge is gone, and now we have a different judge, and that judge doesn't like what I do. Gone. And I'm okay with that. She doesn't have to like what I do, and that's perfectly fine. I have no problems with that. But you know, I'm looking at different people in the forum, and they're upset, and I understand that. I've been upset before. In fact, I was upset earlier, and still I was like, "There's nothing to be upset about." But but they're thinking that their stories there's something wrong with their story. And I'm just like, well, I haven't read your story, but that doesn't, just because they said no doesn't mean shit. It doesn't mean that your story's bad. It means it wasn't for them.
I have sold the story they rejected.
Yeah, I've sold stories they've rejected.
Hell, I sold the story that they rejected, and then I sold the prequel.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It is not. I don't
write for that age group. Is what I've determined is I don't write for their politics or their age group. And
well,
I know that you don't believe that there's a political element, but I do.
No, I do. When I can look at
that, but like I don't write for any age. I'm not stopping to go. This is above 13-year-old level or whatever. When I was 13, I was reading stuff that my mom couldn't read.
Right. So I
don't buy that as an excuse.
Well, here's the thing I keep thinking about is all the stuff that they say needs to go into a story. That's cool. But if you look at their winners, you can almost invariably find examples of where they broke their own rules.
You mean you can only find a few examples of where they followed them?
Okay, that's probably a better way of putting it.
At least what I've seen. I mean, like I got to admit right off that I have not read all of. I couldn't because the story don't engage me. So I don't want to read anything that doesn't engage me.
There's quite a bit where I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to pay for this. This is like it's not engaging me, and I'm all right, whatever. Or there's a lot of stuff that doesn't engage me, I guess. And that could just be, again, why I'm getting more, rejected more often, because what they're interested in is not what I'm interested in, which just goes to prove, go find yourself a different market. But I don't know why I'm upset with other people's being upset, but when I see them thinking that their stories are bad or that their story is...
That's what you're upset about.
Yeah, I'm like, no,
it's not that they're upset, it's that they're disheartened, and the contest should never dishearten them.
I still think the advice, keep submitting until you can't. I have no problem with that advice whatsoever, because most of the stories I've sold are rejections from that contest, because I wrote for the contest, and when it didn't work there, I found other markets. The problem is when you're, and I think you've tried to push me on this, if you're focused on that one contest to the detriment of all the other markets and all the other opportunities, you're screwing yourself over. And and I was like, all right, that's fine. It's definitely something where I need to...
If you don't value your stories, if you don't value your stuff because it doesn't win that contest, and you're just focusing on that contest, you're not focusing on doing what you're setting out to do. You're setting out to be a writer. You're not setting out to just win one contest.
That's right. I never had, it was not my intention to be a winner of the contest. It was my intention to be a writer. And that contest is superficial compared to that. But
yes.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's just, all right, cool. And there are plenty... There are more best-selling novelists that are not winners of that contest than there are. And that's the way it's always going to be.
And I noticed a trend that of the people that are winners of that contest that are published writers, very few of them go on to publish more than just their initial stories.
Yeah. For whatever reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I'm not claiming there's a reason. I'm just claiming there's a correlation.
Right.
I'm not trying to explain that correlation, but once you notice it, that's like the reason that I got kicked out of a certain mentor's, group. Why did I get kicked out of that certain mentor's group? Because I pointed out that the last few contests, you literally are 1 in 4,000 of winning.
Yeah.
And then when you break it down further, it's not even, it's not better. It doesn't get really much better. So you have to write a story that's not just better than the next 3 people or the next 4 people or the next 8 people, right? You have to write one that's better than the next. I think I figured it out at 400. You have to be the best of 400 to win, because you've got everything from not rejection on to winner.
Well.
And the number, I counted up once, the number of honorable mentions, silver honorable mentions. What else is the other? Semi-finalists, finalists.
Yeah. And then one of the top 3. I guess there's...
It was just a crazy, crazy number, So like, the more I saw that crazy number, the more I'm like, it's almost impossible. They're setting it so that it's against the odds to even place high, which is why I celebrate every time you place high, because I know the odds that you face going into it. You know what I mean?
Right. But ever since the new judge, it's been nearly, I can barely place. And
I don't know who left or who the new judges are.
When Dave Wolverton died, they had to switch who was...
Are you talking about Jody?
Yeah.
Jody likes humor, so I'm surprised that she don't like your stories.
No,
But
she.
Jody's not the only first reader.
Well, okay, but I'm
She's the
telling you,
coordinating judge. Carrie is, and there was another one. Who was the other one?
maybe it's Carrie that I'm thinking about. It was someone they brought on after Dave Wolverton died to handle the initial slush,
Yeah,
and
Carrie was covering because she had worked with Dave and
whatever. But everything went. I mean, it's just. And I'm sorry, but I mean, I've seen some of the stuff that's gotten in the books, and I'm just like, nah, like, no, like this is not good. There's so much stuff I've seen that I'm just like, no, no, okay. And
oh,
and it doesn't have to. If just because I say it's not good, that means it's not good for me. It's not
that's
good
right.
in my opinion. It's
Right. Not
when I'm
engaging you.
seeing just wish fulfillment, as I'm like, that's lame. Like, where's the try fail cycle? There isn't one. This is try success with more success on top of success, all because you know it's it's the epitome of the strong female character. Nothing can defeat strong female character, and it's boring.
Right. That's
And
like
I just
that certain someone's story that really is you made me feel uncomfortable, so I sicked the dog on you.
yeah,
And then you killed my dog, so I got a new one.
yeah.
Like, what's the lesson in that? What's the actual story in that? Where did she fail? Oh, she failed to get the new dogs, and then she succeeded. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Because as far as I can tell, somebody was doing their job. She didn't want them to do their job because she didn't feel safe.
Yep.
And then that someone got bit, even though all he was doing was his job.
Well, here's another thing I keep thinking about. And Orson Scott Card's been very upfront about this. He can look at your story and tell you how he would have written it, but he can't tell you how to write it. So,
I love Orson Scott Card when he talks about storytelling. Really,
I do
he
too.
He drifts a little bit, but that's the reason that I was at his workshop in the first place.
But in the end, let's face it, I don't need to be an Orson Scott Card clone.
No.
So.
But I don't think he ever tried to tell anyone to be what he was. What I know, like he strengthened the opening lines, strengthening the hook, and strengthening. He was mechanical about it, and he was showing you. He was showing you literary examples of those mechanics, not really of his opinion as so much as you could do it this way, you could do it that way. One thing I hated about Dave's advice is that Dave would always, always, always go to romance. And it make my eyes roll in the back of my head. Like, I'm not trying to write a romance. So don't give me a romance example, because not all romance examples apply to other stories.
Hold on a second. All right, I'm back. I mean, I never left, but took the mute off. Oh. Now, it's kind of funny because in the forum, I don't know when the last time you were looking in the forum.
A long time ago.
So, Martin Shoemaker put, oh, dang it. I was going to put the pre-order thing in the doobly-doo down below, but I forgot. Oh, well.
What?
Next time. That neurodivergent anthology that I'm in, the pre-order is available. And I was going to put it in our
description. You have the availability of actually putting the link inside the chat.
Oh yeah, I could do it that way. But anyway, so now I gotta think about what I was thinking. Something about right is so Martin Shoemaker had posted this thing a while back about what he calls the unwritten rules. And they're fine, whatever. I went through and I've looked at them, and I'm not violating any of those rules with my story. And again, one of those things where it's like, really, you're going to say this isn't even close to be okay, whatever. But I really think there are way more unwritten rules than what Martin wrote. Like, number one, if you want to improve your odds, have a female protagonist. You'll improve your odds.
Number two, nowadays that's almost common sense.
Yeah. Number two, I would say do not use third person. I know the judges say you should use third person. I think they lie. They may not realize they're lying. It may not be intentional, but I think when you start looking at the numbers, you will find that most of the stories that win are first person. And the judges hate saying that. The judges may hate reading it. I don't know, but they sure like to reward it.
Well, I don't know if it's that way for Jody. But it was for Dave. I don't know if it's that way for Jody.
It was for Dave and oh gosh darn it. Not Orson Scott Card, although I think Orson Scott Card prefers third person.
He said he prefers third
Tim
person.
Powers. Tim Powers, I don't think likes it. He likes third person. And again,
I think he recognizes that it's harder to write, but I think he's done his time with first person too.
Well, okay, but I think that they still like to push that it should be. There we go. Divergent realms. Anyway, I think you might as well do first person. There's no downside, I at all. And I don't like reading first person normally because I think it's incredibly hard to do first person right or well.
I don't mind if it's done well. I didn't like it when I first started, but since I've been reading more steadily, I do find that personality comes through in that first person very well if it's done right. It's just the trouble that most people don't recognize what's wrong when they're writing first person badly.
And then, yeah, I'm sorry, but have a left-leaning content, you'll do better.
Yeah.
And anyone who likes to say, we don't know who's like, I don't care if you know who is writing it, you still know what the content is. And if you have, that's why, like, there was one story that I got in the book that I swear to God, it was nothing but feminist wish fulfillment. But then also, so there was a secret organization, and they all wear dresses, even the men. And I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. It's just dumb. It's so obvious pandering.
On the street, would it?
What?
It wouldn't be very secret if they had to go on the street at least for a minute.
Well, yeah,
they saw all these people walking in dresses, and guys and girls walking in dresses.
They're all dressed like Mary Poppins. I kid you not. They're all dressed like Mary Poppins. Down to the umbrella and everything. And the guys have to wear dresses and all that because that's empowering.
Sounds like somebody's trying to copy Gail Carriger. She did the Parasol Protectorate, but that's I don't think the guys are wearing dresses in that. But it's Victorian, so they have parasols, and they're fighting vampires and werewolves and stuff like that. But they have Victorian etiquette and all this other stuff that plays into parts of it. Sounds like almost somebody's trying to riff off of what she's done. Like Soulless.
Well, don't get me wrong. I read some good stories out of the contest, and I don't want to harp on nothing but the bad stuff, but there's plenty of stuff to harp on. And I mean, it's kind of pointless to harp on it. They can publish whatever they want to publish, and
yep, they're going to.
That's right.
Furthermore, they're going to.
That's right, and more power to them. But
no,
I don't want any other writer to think just because you can't please them means there's something wrong with your story. It means they don't see the brilliance in whatever you're doing. Now, could there be people that are sending? I'm sure there are plenty of people that turn in absolute dog turds of fiction. I get that, but I don't think I'm
one of the ones that get the helpful advice.
I keep thinking, well, I can generally sell every single one of my stories if I really want to. I'm good.
Yeah. I know, actually, most of the stories that I write lately, I have an editor that tends to buy, so like, why would you send it anywhere else if you pretty much can sell it, you know? Kind of feel a little bit like Robert E. Howard in that aspect, where he was writing so much for Weird Tales. Like, I started publishing with the small publisher that we both know. And I'm pretty happy with how he's treated me, so he's paid me well for the stories. I mean, I know he does a token payment for a lot of other stories, but he pays me professional rates, so I can't complain. And I like him. And he doesn't really give me a whole lot of, I don't like this edit, or I want you to change this, or I want you to change that. It doesn't tell me that I have to have a certain political bent. Doesn't tell me I can't have a certain political bent. So those are endearing qualities, right? They don't. He doesn't tell me what to write, what not to write. Some, like I've written stories he hasn't bought, but most of the stories, if I send them to him, he's interested. So why would why would you go anyplace else with it? How's that look? Can you see his face? Let's do this then. Yeah, well, guess that needed demarked.
I was on mute. I'm sorry.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm like, I asked you a question, you ignored me. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll just not talk about that.
I didn't really ignore you. I didn't ignore you because I didn't hear any questions.
Yeah. So, A, if you didn't hear me say this about the face, looks good. And I would not do a whole bunch of detail on the face. I think that's a good.
Nope. And I think I'm going to cut down, especially designing them, because that face is pretty close to a thumbnail size. So I kind of wanted him to look a little Kingpinish, a little Uncle Festerish, but also kind of a little bit of animalish.
Well, that works.
Because we were talking about whether or not humans are human. And I need to know that as far as whether I'm drawing a human or more of a mutation.
Well, I like the way it looks. So I would keep what you have. And yeah, that's good. That's one of the things that some of this, I mean, it's just one of those things where until I don't put a lot of detail normally in the description of anyone because I'm kind of like, well, let's see what Rich comes up with because you're the artist. Some of the stuff I'd put in if I thought it was super important, but for this guy, I was like, nah. I knew that I wanted it to be like, I know story wise what I want him to be like, but
yeah, and that's kind of where I'm leaning, is that you were telling me some of the elements
right.
to his character. I don't know if I really get his motivation yet, but that part of all that's determining why I'm drawing him the way I'm drawing him is because we talked, and I know that there is some intent.
Right. And some of that stuff, that's one of those things where I wasn't quite sure. I was trying to explain it to my wife. Because, like, so I was having a hard time coming up with a villain. And I mean, there's just certain aspects of it that I was kind of looking for. But when I started thinking of the history, because we had always said this is a post-apocalyptic type world, then I was like, well, what kind of post-apocalyptic, like, who comes out of that? Like, who, you know what I mean? Like what creates this character? And that's what I got into the whole, well, part of, there's that, plus there's just things that interest me in general. Like, going back to Star Trek, actually, there's never been a series that I know of that really explored, I think it's called the eugenics war, whatever it is that creates Khan. Like, they have Khan, but I'm like, no, just give me that timeline. Like, show me the eugenics war. I don't care about Star Trek. This is long before the Federation. I want to see that. I want to know what that was like. So there's that. So then I had this idea, well, okay, so if our guy is a cyborg, and that's okay, what wouldn't be okay? And that's when I kind of got the idea of, all right, if there was some kind of genetic thing that kind of went down in the past, and so now people are, you know, they really don't like genetic manipulation. Well, that gives something for the villain to do, for one thing. So, you know, some of it's, I suppose, political, because, hey, Goose Baby! It's Goose Baby. I don't know who Goose Baby is, but it's Goose Baby. Welcome to the Gordox Pub, where the drinks are as good as your imagination.
What we're up to is we're designing a villain
for our graphic novel that will eventually happen. Yep, a villain. We needed an antagonist for our protagonist. We are not making a duck in a robot mech. Sorry. Maybe secretly he is a duck inside of a meat suit robot mech. Maybe it's a goose.
Well, he's not a doctor, so we ruled out Quack.
Oh. That's a really bad and yet perfect dad joke.
Well, I'm a dad.
Yeah, I know.
What can I say? I don't think it needs any defense. You don't like it?
There should be a mathematical equation about like how bad a dad joke is, like inversely shows how good the joke is. But because the more people cringe, the more it's enjoyable for the person who told the joke.
I love how the music that I listen to is called dad rock now,
Oh,
and a lot of it's like metal. Okay.
So it's Goose Baby. Rich, how long have you been drawing for?
Oh, an hour and 17 minutes.
Ha 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 ha. When Rich started drawing, it was still AD instead of whatever ADE now or whatever. It was still BC instead of BCE.
Oh yeah,
that's how long he's been drawing. If you know, you know. And he also says, I want to get into graphic novels and doing my own, but I'm kind of focused on portraits right now.
Oh, very cool. Well, I do portraits.
Everyone here has done portraits then. Yay.
Yeah. I've done a portrait online.
Well, I have not.
Jesse. You did Jesse and...
That's true.
Yeah. So, yeah, like... All art can be applied to all different types of art. It's just how you apply it or how you can conceive of to apply it. I'm not trying to do a portrait now. I'm trying to do a storytelling device. So it's not so much about it's not so much about realism, but believability and characterization. So I guess that there's a little bit of that in the portrait because the portrait characterizes the face. But I'm not worried about the exactitude that you have to with a portrait. Right now, this is actually the first time I drew this guy. This is this guy being created right here, live. So I don't even know how we're gonna feel about it when I'm done, which is why I've asked Brett how he feels, because Brett is the current writer.
I think there was an implied threat there.
And creator of this character, actually. Like, I'm creating the visuals, but you created the... No, not. I guess I'm just...
I'm just joking with you, man. I don't care.
I did a little bit of writing on it, but you're doing the lion's share. I don't really want to draw it and write it because I'm not in that place right now. So it's just easier for me to let Brett do the heavy lifting on the writing part and try to do the heavy lifting on this part.
Yes, because it's definitely easier to let you do the heavy lifting on this part for me. You're faster by far than what I would be.
And I'm trying to get faster because I'm trying to focus on what's important as far as what needs to be. It's hard when you draw like every little half tone and shadow and all that stuff to try to go to a place that kind of simplifies that, right? Your brain's already thinking, well, I need to turn that shape a little bit more or whatever, but in comics you kind of have to let the viewer turn the shape a little bit, otherwise you will be there forever trying to draw it. My object, the goal of a sequential artist, isn't to get a portrait or something so realistic that you can't walk away from it at night. It's to tell a story, and it's to make it a believable enough visual version of that story that the reader accepts it. That's why I'm trying not to overdo the drapery, which is the clothes. Just enough to show where one part's wrinkled and the other part's stretched a little bit.
Oh, and I had some design questions for our protagonist, which I think I'll get into off screen before I talk to before I. It's probably not that big of a deal, but before I say anything on stream on some of this, I kind of want to make sure we're on the same page, I guess. But
Yes.
I did have. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of weird because we're kind of doing this balancing act of
yeah, well, we don't want to.
And
we don't want to keep restarting, right? We want to make sure that we know what we're talking about before we start.
Yeah. This would not require anything to be restarted, but it's definitely. My thought was. This is part of my thought, I guess, is that I guess part of me is crass and commercial and capitalistic, and I'm thinking, all right, what could be merchandised, what could be, turned into various revenue streams, which I know when you're trying to be artsy fartsy, you're not supposed to be, it should be all just pure art and blah blah blah. But I think you and I would like to get paid.
Like I said, my goal is the storytelling.
Well, I get that.
It's not being artsy fartsy. Like, I would love to, put a couple of pages in that are really artsy pages, but for the time being, the most important part is the storytelling.
Well, okay, that's still being artsy fartsy. I'm saying.
I don't think so.
Okay, well,
because I'm willing to sacrifice a lot of stuff that would be considered artsy fartsy. So.
Yeah, well, thinking about marketing is not part of the writing process, but it's still something I'm thinking about. If that makes sense.
Well, the only reason that I'm not thinking about writing the only reason that I'm not thinking about marketing, as in toys and whatever, is because it's a lot less likely to come to fruition. So it's just daydreaming and wool gathering at this point.
Okay, that's fine.
We don't have anything together, so it's not about. I'm not saying, hey, like I wouldn't make toys because it's artsy fartsy. No. I mean, if somebody wants to make toys, or somebody has a way to make toys, and there's a market for it, fuck yeah, make them.
Well, okay. So anyway, but again, just kind of thinking about marketing aspects of some of this, and part of it's also just what would look neat on the page. You know what I mean? Like, some of it boils down to, John Brown and his zing and his, what was the other one? Boom. There was zing, and there was something else, wasn't there?
Boom.
Yeah.
Zing and boom.
Yeah. So some of it's just thinking in those terms, but also some of it's just, I think, looking at other properties that have worked and trying to figure out, all right, how do you emulate some of this? Because I'd like to have that kind of success too. But so,
yeah, you're a long way from that, though. I mean,
I get that. It's not my primary concern. It's just something that I think about in character design, where I want to make sure, that it could happen later on. Like, the opportunity is there. Like, did you ever watch the show Heroes?
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems with that show, in all honesty, was the fact that you can't market toys for it.
That, and it's Robert J. Sawyer's book.
Okay, but it's just one of those.
The story is not not the same as the book. And Robert J. Sawyer is probably someone whose fiction you wouldn't want to read.
Okay. But I'm saying, all I'm saying political. Is just thinking about some of the stuff where it goes into, they have all. It's superhero fiction without any of the spandex. I mean, there's nothing there for toys. And I'm like, all right, cool. I mean, I like the show, but I can understand where financially it didn't necessarily work. So just thinking about some of those things. Again, ultimately on my end, I want to make a good story. That's goal number one for me. But at the same time, just being honest and upfront that I am thinking about some of the marketing stuff. And because in the end, we're going to be the ones that have to market this. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing it on stream as a form of marketing. And it's working out so well for us, all of our followers, right, who we appreciate and love and thank you. And by the way, if you're watching this and you haven't, decided to subscribe and hit the link and all that stuff, maybe you should. But we'd appreciate it. But anyway, so I thought of a weapon that I thought our protagonist should have, because I thought it sounds cool to me. And I was going to run that by you because it's at least partially. I mean, it's derivative of everything's derivative, I suppose. But I can tell you exactly where I think this is derived from. But I still think that's
something you shouldn't do.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm like, nah, some of this stuff, I mean, that's just like some of the background information. And I'm like, a lot of the stuff that I shared with you the other night never, ever has to be on the page. Ever. But I thought you might want to know it. You know what I mean? Like, I guess some of it's like me justifying how things got to be. Like, what kind of apocalypse did we have? That kind of thing. This is, quote, post-apocalyptic. Was it an asteroid? Was it a nuclear explosion? What happened?
It was the super flu.
Yeah, it was the super flu. It was Captain Trips.
So there wasn't the super flu.
Oh, it wasn't Captain Trips.
Not only did Stephen King do that, but when I did it, I got accused of copying Cormac McCarthy, which he never explained how his apocalypse happened.
Well, I thought it would probably be a good idea to have an idea. And so that's kind of, and I was kind of walking you through how I got through my idea. But a lot of that never has to show up on page. It might show up later on. Maybe we do a flashback. Maybe it comes into the story. I don't know. But it's something that I think it's a nice place to have I guess to at least have a tentative idea over what we're kind of thinking on some of that. So
the only reason that matters, specifically that matters,
yeah,
is what the fallout is.
Well, I had to get to that part where I made bionic enhancement cool and genetic enhancement taboo at the very least. And of course, there's going to be some kind of fine line there that people are going to push and whatever.
But from what you explained to me,
yeah,
I don't see how that matters with some of the things that are supposed to be behind it.
Well, it made sense for me, and I have to do the heavy lifting. So, I mean, that's a flippant answer.
No, it's not an answer, and I think maybe you didn't get what I was asking because I'm trying not to throw that out there.
Okay, well, we can discuss it later too, but I'm just saying, The
Well, I'm just saying, like, you're saying that is the result, but I from what particular aspect is that the result of, and why don't the other aspects of that have results? You see what I
well,
mean?
so my thought was because again, I mean, I'm
And yeah,
I
like you don't have to
well,
over
I don't.
explain it or whatever, but it might come into play with art. It might come into play with the creation of weapons or devices or whatever.
The way I saw it was, and I guess kind of inspired again, still by Star Trek to some degree, um, which they kind of have some of this stuff in Star Trek too. Now I think about it, the more I think about it, the more I think Star Trek's done more and more of this. But uh,
I'm glad I didn't watch Star Trek much,
oh well, trust me,
so I don't
some of this.
accidentally rely on their depictions.
Well, to be fair, there's enough Star Trek. It's kind of hard not to hit something that Star Trek hasn't at least touched on. But with their eugenics war, one of the problems is that you have these genetically engineered people that think they're superior than everyone else, and they fight. And I'm like, all right, so if that happened, if there was a group that was genetically altered, and that also linked into other aspects of what was going on, like there's more than just backing up the whole bionic enhancement versus genetic enhancement, but if that's the type of people that started the violence, that created the negative situation, that's why that's taboo. It's seen as messing around with that kind of stuff leads to, people thinking they're superior than other people, and it creates conflict, and therefore that's why it's taboo. Because you don't want people, you think you're so good? Well, my genetics are better than your genetics, and therefore your genetics should be purged. And, it just, part of this, I mean, I guess, did you ever see, is it Robots that had Robin Williams as a voice actor? I think so. It's one of the darkest.
I didn't that great impression on me, though.
Oh, but it's got one of the darkest scenarios. Like, for a kid's film, it's one of the darkest science fiction aspects ever. That when you have people who are built, so, for them it's robots, but for us it would just be genetically altered. At some point, you're going to become obsolete, and they're going to stop providing updates. And when they stop providing updates, what happens to you? I mean, it's some really dark stuff in that. And so I'm just kind of playing with a lot of those things. And so that's why, I kind of wanted it to be. Plus, I needed a way to show that the villain is a villain. Like, there are structural things, there are just story elements that I think work, and there's some. I guess it plays into some of the aspects, and I guess it plays into some of current politics, but it can be bought into from both sides. Like, when you start talking about, oh, these people think their genetics are better. Well, okay. Are you talking about white supremacy? Like, that's one aspect of it, I suppose. If you want to go there, it's there for you to go there. Well, that's fine. But also, if it's just this whole trust the science thing, if that's your kind of boogeyman, well, it's got aspects of that too. So I just felt like it's I haven't seen a lot of the. I know I'm saying I'm inspired by Star Trek, but then Star Trek never did it. So I'm looking at something that I feel like, and even I'm not exploring that particular area. I'm saying, all right, I think if this would have happened, you don't end up with the Star Trek Federation. You end up with bad things. So, I mean, I guess I still think it's something that you don't see a lot of, that particular reason or these reasons. I think it's something that could happen. And, that whole, and that's why I keep coming back to, it's not really illegal in that there's technically no governing body over these city-states. But at the same time, all right, it's taboo. It'll be taboo. And some places can make it illegal. Some places just kind of frown on it, however you want it.
I don't think you can get that. I don't think you can do that believably. I'm going to specify because I know I just kind of in the middle of that and say that, and then you're like, what do you mean? Well, what I'm saying is I don't think you can get city-states with no kind of government.
No. It's not no kind of government. It's no interlinking government. So,
well, yeah, but you said no government, and I know maybe that's not what you meant, but what my thinking was is that I was thinking that they may have more than one type of government. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's what I mean. There's each city-state can have their own government.
So just for clarification, that each city-state will have a different type of government. No, rephrasing. It will have a disparate type. It doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be two different democracies or republics or whatever, but they're just going to be run differently.
Yeah, and some of them might be aligned with other ones, and some of them, will be diametrically opposed to other ones, and it's whatever it makes a good sandbox with lots of opportunity for us to play it.
Right.
It's kind of like I hate to go back to Star Trek, but damn it, I'm going to. Star Trek can go to a different planet every week.
You don't hate it that much.
Well, I know, but we're not going off planet, but it's like, how do you get to where you can go to a different planet every week? All right, different city-state. If that's what you want to do, that's what you could, it opens up that kind of possibility. So that's kind of what I was going with that.
Except for we're just doing one story right now.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I'm saying...
I'm not putting that out there for you.
Oh.
I'm putting that out there for anybody that stumbles on this or might be listening, that we don't have like a weekly installment or a bi-monthly magazine planned.
We have one graphic novel planned.
Right.
But I think, not that I don't, because it should have a beginning, middle, and end. It should be set up that way. Like, this graphic novel will be a standalone graphic novel. Will there be opportunities for us to revisit this? I sincerely hope so.
Well, I sincerely hope that it's done well enough that we want to.
I hope it's done well enough that other people want us to.
Well, there's that, but if I don't want to, then it doesn't matter what other people want.
That is true. For those of you who may be watching, I tried to get Rich to listen to Nina Simone, one of the greatest vocalists ever, and he's just said, no.
I don't even know what you're talking about. And I know you went out of your way to tell me before, but okay, whatever.
We've talked about Nina Simone.
Register on me. See, the hard thing is that I listen to so many different types of music. It's so much music that it's hard for me to find music that makes me feel anything or makes me want to listen to it. Like, Amanda just downloaded Spotify on my phone, and I've always been a fan of listening to the albums and then buying the albums if you like them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've always had like a 3-song minimum. It has to be 3 songs for me to buy an album.
See, to make
the value worth it. But she's she's determined not to buy anything because of Spotify and all this other stuff. So she basically downloaded Spotify, and she's all kinds of frustrated because I don't I don't know how to use Spotify really because I've never used Spotify. I just buy the music I want, The Amazon, you can just download the digital version and have it on my laptop, and I can just put it on my MP3 player. And then MP3 players are obsolete. I'm like, really? Because I remember when cassettes were making fucking 8-tracks obsolete,
Well, I enjoy Spotify, but I do worry sometimes that on one hand, it will kind of calcify my listening habits because it'll suggest stuff if I want it to, but normally I'm like, no, I made a playlist. Stick to the damn playlist because that's what I want to listen to.
Right.
And so, especially, I just getting older. Although I still find new music, I still find stuff that I've enjoyed, but it does worry me. But it's also one of those things where it's like I am more likely to explore an artist now, kind of, because I don't have to buy everything. I don't have to buy an album. So, like, when I first heard a band called Riverside, and I just heard a random song. It was on YouTube, actually, when I heard them. And I was like, oh, this is a really good song. And then I can go through it, and I don't have to buy the song. I don't have to buy the album. I can just go look up the band, Riverside, and then I can listen to as much as... if I don't like it, next. It's just kind of nice.
Right.
But, I mean, Nina Simone is one of those people that I found... I'm pretty certain I discovered her... it's the American version of Point Blank. That's what... I think that's... Or is that what it is? Point Blank? La Femme Nikita, the film... The American version was...
Return.
Okay, there you go.
With Bridget Nelson.
I think...
Yeah,
she was the American version of the
film. It was Bridget Nelson.
And they use that factors into the story, and it factors in, it's part of the soundtrack. And
well, then I probably heard it.
Yeah. If you have never heard a single Nina Simone, or if you've never heard of a song sung by Nina Simone, I would actually be kind of surprised. Because a lot of her stuff has been used for various ads, films. Just I don't think she's as recognizable as Diana Ross or Aretha Franklin, but I think she's as good. And in fact, I would argue she might be better. But that's me. Versus, so I tell you about Nina Simone, you're like, no. Meanwhile, you tell me about Sabotage, and I'm like, I'll have to look that up. And I have listened to that album. In fact, I have it on Spotify. So the
Sabotage,
whatever it is, the Christmas. For me, it's a Christmas with
the Christmas one, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which is not Sabotage. It just has some numbers.
Now with DT Jesus and stuff.
Okay, so yeah, that's Streets, a rock opera.
Yeah,
but the story to that album, that concept album, was written by the guy who ran Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Ah,
the John Oliva, the guitarist Chris Oliva, the guitarist for Sabotage, was at Paul's house and was reading a manuscript he had lying on his desk or something like that, and that was what they ended up doing with it. He was like, I really want to write a concept album from it. There's the album before that too, which is Gutter Ballet, and that's a pretty damn good album also.
I may have to look. I may have to look that up because I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, like, So I'm the first to admit that I'm not very broad in my tastes with stuff. I actually have to work at something. So like if I want to check something out new, I'll I'll have to have a couple of different selections and kind of work my way into it, see if I like it. And a lot of times it's the first one I listen to that'll decide me on whether I like it or not. Like I listened to the first Liquid Tension Experiment and I bought all three with no problem.
Huh.
Because it was Dream Theater without James Labrie and with Tony Levin on bass. Well, Chapman stick, but uh, I bought the Winery Dogs and didn't like it. Like it's got Billy Sheehan in it. It's got Mike Portney from Drum Theater. It's got a couple of the other guys in it, and I didn't like it. Didn't like the way that it sounded. I just didn't like it. But Sons of Apollo, like the first three singles that they released video-wise, I loved them. I bought the album for them. I think there's 4 songs on that album I like, and the other 4 I really don't like, but those 4 songs I really like. And,
go ahead.
So that's Dream Theater, because I like Dream Theater, so I don't like every Rush album, Rush is hit or miss for me, but when they hit, they hit,
I haven't. Well, that's not a no. Even yep. I like them all.
And,
I was gonna say. I was gonna say that. Oh God bless it, Caress of Steel. I was going to say that's not a very good Rush album for me, but it's still got stuff on it that I do enjoy. So
well, honestly, if I listened to a couple of songs and didn't like them, then I'm probably not going to dive into the whole album.
Right.
Well,
Caress of Steel is a pretty harsh. That's a hard album to just sit back and relax and listen to. So.
Yeah. So I appreciate Rush. They're hit or miss for me. Like I don't like the song about being a tree. That's not
the trees. But that's great. I'm a Rush fan. There's no getting around it.
It's not a hit for me. But I can listen to. There's a lot of Rush that I like, but there's no band. The bands that I've loved the most for the longest.
Yeah.
None of them have every album that I love. None of them. The max that I will get, I think the max that I've gotten out of any band is like 5 or 6 albums. But for the most part, the bands that I love the most usually drop 2 or 3. They drop 2 back to back that are really good, and then the third one I have to wait for a long time for them to drop something that feels as good as the other ones. Like I loved Overkill Years of Decay. I loved Overkill Horoscope. The album before that with Hello from the Gutter on it, there was a couple of alright songs. They weren't the same quality of the songs on those 2 albums. And then everything after that kind of seemed confused because they went through stages where they were trying to maybe rap a little bit or try to get into an alternative, feel or whatever, and they just shouldn't have. Anthrax almost lost me when they did that too. When they switched from Joey Belladonna to John Bush. I liked Joey Belladonna as a frontman for him. It took me a few albums for him to get to an album that I thought was perfection.
Yeah.
And right after that, they fucking ditched him and switched the singers. and that other singer can't sing slow songs, and he's good for what he is. And eventually, I got to appreciate Sound of White Noise. That's up there on my list of albums, but it doesn't sound like the same band that was before with Joey Belladonna. And now that they've switched back to Joey Belladonna, they've put out two more great ones. So, like, to me, then now they've got five good albums instead of your normal three or whatever. Overkill had three for me. New one's not too bad, but it's kind of like feels like it's a watered down version of their better older stuff. Metallica never really went back to what they did after their first four, and the best of Metallica to me was Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All. The 598 EP, but those are all cover songs. So, like, even the Black Album was
Oh, see, that's.
But after that, like, I could care less. I literally wasn't interested in Metallica for years after that, and I loved Metallica.
For me, Metallica's hit and miss.
Megadeth was doing that too. Did the same thing. They put out a couple of really good albums, and then all of a sudden it was trying to follow Metallica. I really think because they kind of went through the same waves.
Well, that's funny because I told my boys that Metallica has the absolute best pop song I've ever heard, and they're like, and I'm like, yeah, the song "Fuel." I'm sorry, is a pop song, and I love it. And it's definitely got
Garo, like, yeah, whatever.
I just, this is what it is. I don't know, but if it hits, it hits. And there's some stuff, like I was telling, with this Spotify and making playlists, I was like, well, because my boys are like, why don't you ever share your playlists? And I'm like, no, you don't. You don't need to know some of this. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, and my son's like, you're listening to Taylor Swift, aren't you? And yeah, there's some of my playlists have Taylor Swift, and I don't care because some of her stuff is good. I don't care.
Somebody asked me over the weekend if I was a Swiftie.
Yeah,
all I could think of was Tom Swiftie.
That was my first thought too. Although it's kind of funny.
Talking about Taylor Swift, like I don't even know what you're saying, so I guess not.
Do you know who Jonathan Swift was, though?
Yes.
I just had a shirt. Actually, I have it on now. Hold on a second.
I think you've asked me about that, and I haven't known, and you've educated me a couple of times.
So, you know me, I like to make T-shirts for where I work, and I like them literary. So, Jonathan Swift's Irish Barbecue, because he's the guy that wrote A Modest Proposal, where they advocate killing Irish babies and eating them. And I just thought that was hilarious, especially as St. Patrick's Day was coming up. I was like, oh, yeah, Jonathan Swift's Irish Barbecue. So that's the Swift I'm into.
And Taylor Swift.
Well, whatever. I don't care. She's made the 80s sound great. That's all it is. I like, all right. So, like, I have, like, there's a certain 80s vibe that because that's when I grew up and because the aesthetic of the time, it makes me think of science fiction. And if a song makes me think a certain way, has that vibe for me, I'll put it on the playlist because it'll keep me in that flow state. And like I might have like Taylor Swift, Smashing Pumpkins, all kinds of different things all going on at once because they got the right vibe. And like I'm thinking Machine to God from Smashing Pumpkins and Heavy Metal Machines and stuff. It's got a really cool, and Def Leppard does too. A lot of Def Leppard stuff has this very futuristic vibe for me.
Yeah, and see, now that's the same. Like you talk about Def Leppard.
Yeah.
2 albums for me, really.
Which ones? Pyromania and what?
Huh?
Which 2 albums?
Pyromania and Hysteria.
No, I could have called that. I could have called that one. I like both of those albums.
I mean, I have like a song or 2 off of like On Through the Night or High and Dry or whatever, but Steve Clark and Phil Collins had a unique sound. That's the 2 guitarists before Steve Clark died. But after Steve Clark died, they just never could achieve that same feel for me. So everything else just was dumb.
I always felt like it was Mutt Lange that was doing it for me. Honestly, I thought it was more his influence. So
Because he's a producer?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's like saying Bob Rock made fucking Motley Crue or Bob Rock made Metallica or whatever. Nah, I don't think so. He might have made a clearer recording of it, but what I'm talking about, actually, there's an interview with Phil Collins, who's a much better guitarist than people think.
Yeah.
You know, they write him off as a pop rock guitarist or whatever, but
which is what I think was Mutt Lange's influence.
He's really a great guitarist, but he was saying that Steve Clark would lay rhythms down over his rhythms that blew his mind. They didn't feel like they went together, but then you hear the sound afterwards, and it blends so well, you're not really sure who's playing what. I mean, like there's obvious things, and then there's not so obvious things. And he did a demonstration, and ever since I saw that demonstration, I was like, wow, really, Steve Clark did a lot of the innovative sounds. And Steve Clark died like right after Animal Hysteria, right?
I don't know.
He wasn't on Adrenalize. I think he died before Adrenalize came out. I might be wrong. I really stopped following them after that because they didn't put out anything like they had put out before. And I'm not knocking Mutt Lange either, by the way, because Mutt Lange has been on some of my favorite Rad albums. He's been on some of the best of that era. And I am sure that his influence pretty much is heard throughout the whole AV sound. You know what I mean?
Probably.
Same with Bob Rock. Like, I don't necessarily agree with Bob Rock's choices for all this stuff. I thought Justice for All would have been a great album if they'd have just turned the fucking bass back up. And it was partly in respect for Cliff Burton and a little bit of ribbing on Jason Newsted, but we really all lost out on because Jason Newsted is definitely a decent bass player too.
Yeah.
He doesn't play with his fingers. Let me rephrase that. He doesn't. He picks instead of finger tapping or slap popping and pulling and stuff. I remember when Rob Trujillo was with Suicidal Tendencies.
Yeah.
And Infectious Grooves, which is basically like Near from Suicidal Tendencies, and Rob Trujillo, and I think Mikey from Suicidal Tendencies too. You're getting your Bond villain, your Bond barrel.
There you go. Well, I mean, part of that thing with the Bond villain was I had to get my head kind of to be in the right spot so we could have a story that would be self-contained, and I think is more with what you wanted. And I had to kind of have a frame of reference, I guess. We had talked about...
I wanted to have a main guy, you know what I
right.
mean? So, like, if you want to think Bond villain and that inspires you, that's fine. Yeah. But my thinking was that it didn't seem very fulfilling to have the main villain just the guy who's hunting them down, like Boba Fett be the main villain in a Star Wars, episode. But just so long as there's, trying to think of how to put this, there's very few villains with motivations that aren't another villain's motivations too.
Okay.
So, like, most motivations for war are religion and money, religion and conquest. So, religion, gold, and conquest have been the three major reasons for war throughout time. And if you're thinking about something that's putting us in a state of war, you know what I mean?
Right.
The only one that's not really been covered lately, and I guess it's kind of been covered, but covered in hushed tones, is religion, right?
Right.
There used to be a time when we went to war, this Middle Ages, the Agincourt, Battle of Agincourt, we had priests on the battlefield. So, I mean, nobody was gonna kill the priest, obviously, but the priests were like, they were there to lead. They were there for spiritual guidance. They were there for, they were there. They were a part of it. Agincourt was about conquest. It was about saying the King of England had the rights to the crown of France, which they've had that argument for 100 years. That was the 100 Years' War, right?
Right.
And then they had to make a show of it because they were broke. The French flew the oriflamme, which meant no more mercy, and the English thought, well, if we can get captives, we get money. That is another reason for war then, is because you didn't kill the knights, you killed the peasants. You captured the knights because the knights had estates and they would pay you. So it may not be that particular way of thinking nowadays. But I can't imagine that something that has been that way forever just faded off. And in a time when the norms of today are destroyed, so you're basically living with cities that are trying to defend themselves from other cities and raiders and whatever's, mutants and whatever possible milieu enemies could be there, right?
Right.
I can't imagine in that time that you wouldn't have people that were trying conquest and people that were trying to get a monetary gain, which, you know, when I say monetary, the value of money or the value, whatever the value is over time, maybe not gold. Maybe whatever is valuable. So when I say the first bad guy that we created, and I don't remember his name now, it's been a week and that's it, right?
Okay.
The one that you named, and I was like, yeah, just name him. He was the equivalent of a Boba Fett, so Boba Fett would be getting paid, right?
Yeah.
He'd be doing it from the money. He wouldn't be doing it for it wouldn't be a holy reason. Well, I guess it could be a religion reason, but that would be a twist in the mix. That would be something that you wouldn't really see that often. But somebody has to pay him. Someone has to command him, whether it's, you know, religion or he's not tracking somebody for conquest. He's tracking somebody for money or some higher purpose, right?
Yeah.
He could be, I guess he could be extended into a main villain by giving him a higher purpose where he believes that he's hunting something down that's evil or something. That could very well be. So, yeah.
Well, if you were to put a gun to my head and say, you know, what motivates this guy, and if you say money, conquest, or money, religion, or politics, for him, for this
well,
guy,
I wouldn't say politics, but because politics is directly behind money, religion, and conquest.
well, okay. I would still argue this guy is more about religion, and I can get into that later. I won't do that on stream.
This guy?
Yeah. This guy is in my head, the people that follow him are fanatics. And he's a fanatic too. Because
right, but he's not a religious fanatic.
We'll talk about that.
Okay. He wasn't presented as one.
Well, okay. I will say that
he was presented for the purpose of conquest to me.
Well, he does have conquest, but why does he want a conquest? And I would argue that some of it is religious in nature. So,
but
not that he's not a Christian, he's not a Muslim or anything like that. So I wouldn't worry.
Yeah, I'm just saying that you can. I'm not. That it doesn't have to be those religions, and we're fantasists. So
right.
we know that it doesn't have to be an established religion to make a story, but
right.
I didn't feel like I got any religious implications, although he might have a sense of purpose for the conquest.
Yeah, that's where I would go.
If you believe that you are the hope You know,
Yeah.
you are the last hope of whatever.
Right.
That could be still a higher notion without being a religious notion. A religious notion, I would say, would imply that he's not the actual, uh, you know, it implies that he answers to somebody else, he prays to somebody else, he worships somebody else, and that was never presented when you talked to me. So
That's because he doesn't. But I
okay,
would.
so I mean, there's higher purpose. Conquest has multiple reasons for it, also, right?
What?
Um, it could be that one person feels like if he unifies all the people, then he'll settle it. It could be one person feels like if he unifies all the people against him, it's the only way it'll be unified, right?
Right.
Those are two alternates of the same coin, two sides. There's plenty of reason for conquest that's not just money or religion, but money or religion and conquest, period. Like as in the gain of territory and people. Those are the three biggest reasons for wars throughout history.
Right.
Not saying there couldn't be a combination of them, or we couldn't expand on them, or given that I just stated it in that way, if it gives you ideas, you can expand plenty on them too. We have a face, this is what I wanted when the whole time that I was saying we need a villain. I wanted a face. I wanted somebody that I could draw so that I know what he looks like, so that I, have an idea.
Okay.
Even if he only makes an appearance or two,
Right.
I have an idea. I know that this is the guy that's behind it all. Because the guy that's tracking him down might be skilled. He might be the guy that has the most screen time, but he's not the guy in charge. He's working for somebody else. This is the guy I wanted because I wanted to have a somebody else that wasn't every somebody else. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why I wasn't sure what type of villain you wanted yet, and also
I didn't have a preset thing. I just wanted somebody that was literally in charge. Like
that's fine.
Literally, the buck stops with them.
And that's what I tried to give you.
That's fine. You get you did your job. But I mean, I think that's why we had such a hard time, kind of getting on the same page, is because you weren't seeing the need for this guy, and I was like, man, that's the guy we need the most, because it's him that's going to direct the story. It's his goals that are going to direct the story. It's his motivations that are going to direct the story. Everything else is happening because of his initiation, or his he set everything in motion.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah, there's also more of that I figured out. There's more so the intro piece, the intro scene, and we said we want a big action piece, which we haven't got. Which I want to work on still, but
we don't have to jump into anything yet. We don't have all the stuff designed.
That's fine, but it was one of those things where I had that intro scene in my brain was nearly 100% its own thing. It was going to introduce the character, the protagonist, and set up the world. So it did things, but I did not want it connected to the rest of the story. Because again, I felt like the plot beats were going to be too repetitive. And you kept wanting it, I think, to connect more, and I was like, no, I don't want it to connect more. And but then,
yeah, I definitely do.
well, so then the more I've played with it, the more I've gotten to this idea of how it connects, so that it's still very much its own thing, but it's also directly connected to what will happen after. So I think you'll like that better. And I still want to flesh out and some of this is I don't know pacing. Like I don't know how much you can cram into the panels. And so, or whatever, the page.
You got to remember that most of the story is not told in the panels. It's left out. It's implied in the gutters between the panels. What we're doing is taking snapshots of a scene. Like the page is you can get so many snapshots.
Right.
All you're doing is the key phrasing, the key story element, and the key scenes that emphasize those story elements. So we're telling a story. You don't tell all the boring parts, right? You don't tell all this. But with the availability of imagery, you can skip.
Well,
you can jump around from one thing to another. Just remember that it's in one scene. You don't have to show every little angle, every little switch, every little back and forth. But as a matter of fact, the more you do that, the more you bog that shit down, and the pacing is going to be impossible. Because we don't want so many words on the page that you just can't read a page and flip it to the next. We want to make you flip to the next page like that and not be able to stop flipping to the next page unless we want you to focus on one scene, like one visual. So like when you're writing a 3-page intro, it doesn't have to be a whole adventure. It's a vignette anyway. But it's a vignette that has an implied beginning and an ending that is going to fold into the next story. That's going to fold into the story. But when you're writing the story, you don't want to write it like that either. You want to write so that you don't want a 10-page fight scene. You know what I mean?
okay.
Unless there's a huge battle going on and you have to fight personal conflict between certain characters going through an overall battle or something like that, you want to tell the story as the story, not a fight. Like the importance of the fight, like Brandon Sanderson was talking about, and this is in prose, is that you don't follow a blow by blow. What you want to do is focus on just the main parts for just the main person. The place that puts them physically in a dilemma and the resolution to that dilemma. Obviously you can do more graphics with it, but if you're like storyboarding a movie, you're not showing every Jurassic Park. You're not showing the raptors go into a room, then sniff about the room, and then showing the people that are hiding behind the counter. You're showing the dinosaur going into the room, the people behind the counter at the same shot, and then an arrow moving the dinosaur forward. Well, you don't have the arrow, but you have dialogue. The storyboarding don't have the dialogue or captions.
Right.
So the movement of them coming into the room, you don't need to see them moving along behind the counters. You just need to see the people in peril. And you know from looking at that one picture that there's a dinosaur in the room and there's a couple hiding behind the counter that's in peril. And then you have to mention in between that the dinosaur smells them or they can hear the clicking, or whatever, But that's the thing. If they're whispering something back and forth or trying not to whisper something back and forth, you've already got the drama of the situation. And that's one panel. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So how many panels do you need to convey an entire scene worth of situation? How many situations in that scene? Because if you look, you should probably look through certain comic books, the ones that maybe left a big impression on you, the stories that left an impression on you. You should probably flip through them and see what they're actually showing in a panel, how many panels they're showing on a page, and what they're actually writing in the panel. If you look at Sin City, it's written to kind of be like a manga, which means that you're going to have fewer panels, but they're going to be wide, expansive panels. They're going to be more detailed scenes. So, you might have 3 panels on a page, but in those 3 panels, you're going to have a lot of payoff. So you might have a panel that's mostly black and it's a silhouette of a face, but that face will have an expression on it, and then there'll be dialogue or caption in that silhouetted part. Or you might just have an action sequence that leads through 4 panels. That's great. If you want to do like a 5-panel action sequence where it's 4 panels on one page and a splash panel with a huge happening on that splash panel, that's great also. But never underplay parts of the story, because if you're underplaying those parts of the story, that means that they don't really need to be in there. So if it needs to be there, why? What needs to be there? Not just what what in particular needs to be there to achieve why it needs to be there, why it needs to be part of it. So I think there's a lot of ways to write for comics, but you have had a lot of practice writing prose and knowing how to get the most bang for your buck prose wise.
Right.
So now you can cut out some of that prose, because some of that prose would be imagery, right?
Right.
Now you decide how much of that prose would be imagery, and then you decide which is the most important images. That's how I think you should really develop something like that. I mean,
well, I have a feeling you're going to get more information than you need, at least at the beginning, because I don't know the pacing of it. Like, I don't have a feel for it yet as to what goes. Like, I know it needs to happen in the scene, and that's what I'll say. This needs to happen in the scene. This is kind of how I see it.
That's a great way to start. Like, if you know this needs to happen in the scene, you right at the top of the page, this is what needs to happen in the scene.
Okay.
And then go into what your major points are and how you're expressing them. Because you're going to write the dialogue, you're going to write the captions, which is basically the prose part of the comic book. But if I see what needs to happen in the scene, then I can maybe determine how to reorganize the panels. And if you're not worried about what I'm reorganizing for the panels, and I'm really getting what you're trying to say as far as what's important to the scene, then it's going to be a stronger page.
That's fine by me.
Like I said, Chuck Dixon, and I think this is one great thing about Chuck, and that's something that I was trying to do the last time I was writing a comic script, said that he picks one panel that's important to him, and all the rest of it, it's as vague as he can leave it for the artist. He wants to leave the artist to tell the story the way they want to, but if he imagines a pilot sitting in a cockpit, he's going to say the pilot's sitting in a cockpit. How, like if it's a spaceship or whatever, then the design of the spaceship or the design of the cockpit or the angle that you're showing him sitting at the cockpit or whatever, those are all left to the artist, and you don't have to worry about it too much unless there's one that's really important, and you pick that one that's your important panel, right?
Right.
That's where you have your big input, is that panel where you have the strongest vision of what's in that panel. But if I know what your goal is for the scene, and then I see how you're writing the panels, then not only can reconfigure panels if I need to, but I can also kind of tell you, like as a collaborator, you might want to think about skipping this part for this part. You know what I mean?
Right. And that works out well for me.
Yep.
So when
I'm gonna kill the stream. We have 2.5 hours in, and that way we get a few minutes to talk, and nobody's just listening to us ramble.
All right.
So yeah, it's a little bit. 2.5 hours isn't super short, but it's short for what we normally run.
Yeah.
But it's after a week of sicknesses, illnesses, and physical garbage that kept us away from it. So anyone that stopped in and watched, thanks for watching. Anyone that's gonna watch, thanks for watching. Feel free to speak, put input in. This is an interactive process, and we want to see the best results.
You never know. We might put a duck in a robot neck. Who knows?
Right? We can help. We can help you. You can help us. You know, we because we are experienced writers can accept criticism. Like, we may not agree with you, but we can take it.
We'll tell you to piss off. It's all good.
So we can take it and we can roll it around in our brain and come up with whether or not it's of value or value to the story or our goals. So anyway, thanks. Good night. God bless. Much love.
Peace.